Hello and welcome to Chapter 8, the Muscular System. When we look at Chapter 8, we're going to do a brief summary of the three types of muscle tissue, and then we're going to focus mainly on skeletal muscle at this time. We're going to look at the parts of the muscle. In another video, I will go into more detail on the muscle cells in action, the neuromuscular junction, the contraction, and the role of calcium. Very important. Then we'll look briefly about contractions. There are a large number of muscles. The ones I want you to know are in a diagram in your textbook. You need to be aware of these ones mainly, and then we'll go into others as we talk about different functions in the body. Figure 8-8, all of these are possible, and figure 8-9, all of these are possible. And actually on Blackboard, I have given you a list of ones I want you to focus on. And even in terms of the hamstring, we're going to do it as a group. And the adductors of the thigh, we do those as a group. And the quads, we do those as a group. So we won't get too specific. I want you to be aware of the main ones though. Okay? So refer to the list on Blackboard to know which ones to look at. Good. Let's go to the beginning and look at the different types of muscle. If you remember back to tissue, which is Chapter 4, there are three types of muscle: smooth, cardiac, and skeletal. And the location is, skeletal is obvious on the skeleton. Cardiac is the heart. And smooth is anytime you need slow contraction. So you're looking at your organs, your vessels, respiratory passageways, your digestive system, full of smooth muscle. When you look at muscles, you are looking at striations, you are looking at location of the nuclei, and you're looking at branched or not branched. And then you also look at control. Is it voluntary or involuntary? When you compare striations, skeletal muscle is striated and cardiac muscle is striated. And later on we'll go to talk about those Z lines. It's the Z lines that cause the striation. And the space between each striation is called a sarcomere, which is the contracting unit of the muscle. So you have in striations in skeletal, striations in cardiac. You have branching in smooth and branching in cardiac. When it comes to the nuclei are outside of the skeletal. They're inside cardiac and inside smooth. Now, when you think about it, your skeletal muscles are voluntary. You think about it, you move. So they're the only ones that are voluntary. Your heart and your digestive tracts, all involuntary, which is good because if you had to think about it, it might be an issue. Okay? Three types of muscle: smooth, cardiac, and skeletal. The muscular system isn't just to look good, but it is for movement of movement of your skeleton, posture maintenance, and that's why they talk about core, and also heat generation. You may not realize it, but when you are cold, you shiver, and that shivering is quick contraction of your muscles, which generates heat, which will then warm up your body. When you look at the structure, and we're mainly looking at skeletal muscle here. We'll look at heart muscle in the heart unit and smooth muscle in the digestive unit. But when you look at it, you again have a tendon is connective tissue that joins the muscle to the bone. The muscle itself has a muscle fiber, and then you go inside the muscle fiber and you have the myofibril. Sorry, that's not right. Muscle fiber, sarcomere. Again, here we have an epi word meaning outside, peri, which is around it, and endomycin, which is inside. Now, if you have ever had pulled pork, this is a beautiful example of how the muscle will string apart, and each one of those muscles is a muscle fiber. And also there's blood vessels running between it. Very important because you need a good oxygen supply, a good glucose supply. Good. The single unit, each muscle has a neuron on it, and one neuron is small motor units are used for fine movements, larger for broad movements. When you want a greater movement, you recruit more muscle fibers. Muscle itself is all or none. It either contracts or it doesn't contract. You can't really have half a contraction of a sarcomere. Now, we will briefly go over the action potential here of how it contracts, but I will do that in a whole separate video because I need you to know great detail here. The neuromuscular junction is the junction between the neuron and the muscle. When the neuron comes down, it has an action potential, and the action potential is sort of the message that comes from it. You also have, the synapse. There is a space between the neuron and the muscle called a synaptic cleft. The muscles itself do not actually touch the neurons. There's this space, and neurotransmitters must go across it. So the action potential comes down. It stimulates the opening of calcium channels. As calcium channels open, that will cause synaptic vesicles containing neurotransmitters to move into the synaptic cleft. In this example, we're using acetylcholine, but there can be different transmitters depending on what kind of reaction. Don't need to know that detail. Now, those neurotransmitters will then go across the synaptic cleft and bind onto a sodium channel here. As it opens, sodium will open, and as it binds, sodium will open. And if it's large enough, you will have an action potential occur in your muscle, and the stimulus will be occurred in the muscle. That stimulus will then go on to release calcium. Very important. That calcium will then go and affect proteins on the binding sites. Now, let's look at the sarcomere. The sarcomere is the contracting unit. Here you have the Z line. That's what causes the striations. There are two types of fibers in the muscle. You have thin actin and you have long fuzzy myosin. The myosin has the heads. When you look on the actin is actually has a complex on it. The actin has tropomyosin covering the binding heads and troponin on the tropomyosin. So the calcium comes in, binds to the troponin, causes the tropomyosin to be pulled off these binding sites. Once the binding sites are pulled off, the myosin heads can bind to the binding sites on the actin. Once they bind, they form a cross bridge. It will bend, and then ATP will release it. To stop the whole process, the calcium just gets absorbed. When the calcium gets absorbed, it will then cause the tropomyosin to cover the binding sites again. That's the basics of it. I will do it again with another video in more detail. That is very important, and I want you to know the details. Okay? When it comes to the muscle system, there is a certain energy. The energy is called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Skeletal muscles prefer to have aerobic metabolism, and that comes from oxygen and glucose. Now, there is an extra source to absorb the oxygen, and this is called myoglobin. It's a way of storing oxygen. You may have heard the term hemoglobin. Myoglobin has greater affinity for oxygen, and it will store it. Glycogen is the storage for glucose in the liver. Okay, so this is stored. Exercise is good. It improves balance, increases muscle, makes you look good. It helps with vasodilation, keeps your heart strong, and keeps you healthy. When it comes to muscle contraction, there are isotonic and isometric. The term iso means same. Isotonic means tension. So you have the same tension in isotonic, so the muscle will shorten and you'll have movement. Isometric means the same length. So the length is unchanged and you have an increase in tension, but you have no movement. Okay? When it comes to the mechanism for muscle movement, the tendon attaches the muscles to the bones. The origin is the site of the fixed part of the skeleton and the insertion is the movable. Now, in other anatomy classes, they often want you to know great detail. I'm not going to go there. But if you look at the bicep, it's called the bicep because you have two parts to it. The origin attached to the scapula and the insertion attaches to the radius. And then by contracting it, you flex this joint. Okay, that's just an example. Now, muscles work in pairs. They don't work on their own. And because muscles can only shorten, they can't lengthen. You have to have an antagonistic pair on the other side. So if you consider the biceps will tighten this joint, and the triceps, which are located on the back, attaching to the pretty much the same but on the back of the arm. When you tighten or contract the triceps, the joint will extend. Okay? Now muscles, just to help you with the naming of the muscles, there's kind of characteristics in the muscle naming. It could be by the location, and one is a temporalis, which is located by the temple. It could be the size. The glutamus maximus is the largest one. It could be the shape, such as the serratus anterior, which is a serrated edge. It can be the direction it goes into. External obliques go oblique, which means sideways. The number of heads. Your biceps has 2 heads. Your tricep has 3 heads. Or it can be the action, such as the flexor digitorum, which causes the toes to flex. Okay, as I said, I want you to know some of these, and I want you to know the general function. Please check the list. When it comes to this, it will be a matching question, so you don't necessarily have to spell them. You just need to match them. That's pretty much it. In terms of disorders, you've got spasms, cramps, you have the muscle starting to dystrophy. Muscles need to be used. If they're not used and they're not innervated, they will actually decrease. One of the things, if you were following Hatfield the astronaut, he had to do resistant exercise because his muscles started to atrophy when he was up there. When he came back, he had difficulty walking because he wasn't using his muscles. Okay, in terms of some disorders, you have bursitis, which is the inflammation of the bursa, which is the sac around it. Tendinitis, inflammation of the tendon. Carpal tunnel syndrome, which means you have pinching of the nerves. Okay, please pay attention to the word anatomy. Myo means muscle, and sarco also means muscle, so you have a sarcomere, sarcolemma. Syn means work together, like a synonym or synergistic. Brachio is arm, quadra is 4. Dis means it's a deterioration, and steno Steno has to do with strength. Okay, that's a quick view. Learn your muscles are the ones I want, and basic function. Good. You don't need to know origin, insertion, or what the antagonists are. So it's pretty surface level. I will do the action potential, the neuromuscular junction in another video.